Who knew that 5 minutes in a Zoom breakout would have changed the trajectory of my life and my career for the last 3.5 years? Back in the fall of 2020, the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute, which is where I got my coaching certification, hosted a series, a social justice series. And one of the first ones I participated in had us go into a breakout room, this randomized group, which turned out to be two people who already knew, colleagues of mine, Ariella and Susan. And we started talking about community and what community meant to each of us. And during that conversation, both of them expressed how they would like to have their children grow up with even more diversity in their community. And as we talked about the challenges of that particular goal, we were then, swooped back into the main room. We didn't have a lot of time, but that conversation left me thinking and spinning for quite some time as I thought about what is it that has me connect with people of such different backgrounds and cultures, and what is it about doing so that's so fulfilling for me? And if I were to take some of that experience that I have and the resources and the connections and share them with other people, what would that look like? And so after several weeks of processing, talking to a couple of friends about it, this idea that had been the seed that had been planted in that Zoom breakout room started to take root. And what grew out of it was a podcast called Not Quite Strangers. That's a podcast that you've been watching or listening to over the past 3.5 years. This podcast has given me the opportunity to connect with over 200 people. I have put together 78 different episodes for this podcast. And in addition to that, some connection challenges to support the people like you who are listening and watching, and taking some of the nuggets from those conversations and actually implementing them in your own life. And I have so much to be grateful for. Again, that 5-minute conversation did so much, not only in giving me the seed, but allowing that time and having conversations with different people for that to bloom to this particular level. It was not expected. That was not expected. So number one, I am grateful to Ariella and Susan for sharing that time with me and for challenging me, although it wasn't intentionally, but challenging me to really start thinking about where I can make a contribution. And I also want to be thankful of the people that I've connected with over the last 3.5 years, those 200 plus people who have shared first of all, their trust with me, right? To be able to come on this podcast and meet a complete stranger or a not quite stranger and have a meaningful conversation for the world to hear and see. That took a lot of courage, and I don't take their trust for granted. I also am grateful for the people who have helped me put this out there into the world in a lot of different formats. You'll meet Felipe in our next episode. He's actually interviewing me, and we'll talk about the podcast and how everything came together and why and how it served me and others over the years. But he really was one of the main supporters in figuring out ways for me to get this message across, the kind of questions that we should use for our connection challenges. He helped me come up with ideas of how to make that podcast experience more engaging for the guests. And, we'll talk a little bit about that in the episode as well. So I won't give too much away, but Felipe, you've played a pivotal role in putting all of those pieces together for me and really helped me kind of get the momentum going. And I also, Felipe had an opportunity to be a guest on the show as well. So he's been one of the contributors, one of those 200 people who contributed to this podcast. The second person that I'd like to thank, or actually the fourth person I want to thank, besides Ariella, Susan, Felipe, is Lucinda. Lucinda Summerlin actually was a guest on this podcast as well, a former coworker of mine. We had a lovely conversation. We hadn't talked in many years. And when I heard that Lucinda also continues to specialize in graphic design and some of the other work she was doing for her husband's band. She and I had an offline conversation where I thought, could you really use your skills, Lucinda? So she joined my team in helping produce the podcast and uploading the episodes and creating some of the artwork. So thank you so much, Lucinda. You have definitely helped me elevate it and take it up a notch, upgrading some of the things that I was doing on my own, but also gave me the bandwidth to think more creatively and challenge myself. So I so appreciate that. Why do I share all this stuff with you? Right. We're in a season, we here in the United States call it Thanksgiving, this particular day in the year that we pause and we celebrate and honor all the people and the things that we are grateful for. And this particular endeavor that I took on in 3.5 years ago has been one of the most exciting, one of the most interesting, most challenging ones that I've had. And I have so many people to be grateful for, even putting me on the path and keeping me on the path. And so now it's your turn, right? It's your turn to think about this past year. Who are the people who have challenged you to grow and experience something new and different? Perhaps they reminded you of the goals or the gifts that you have that you'd like to make sure that you make progress on, or that you expand and learn, develop. Perhaps there are individuals who told you, hey, this is not serving you anymore. Do something different. Perhaps there are experiences that began and put you down a particular path, or experiences that ended that you had to then pivot. All of these things, I believe, are here to serve us and serve us in our growth and expansion, to continue to live a life that gives us meaning and purpose. So I also don't take for granted that without all of these things, I wouldn't have met you. You wouldn't be listening to this right now or watching this. And so I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for what you have brought, the energy, the intention of having connected to this wonderful journey with me, that I put this all together in service of you, and hope, in the hopes that the conversations that you hear, or the questions that I pose, or the insights that my guests have shared with you would make your life better, more interesting, more fulfilled, more connected. Thank you all so much for your devotion, your commitment, and your support over the last few years. As you'll hear in the final episode next week, it's not over yet, but it's definitely shifting, right? This is part of the evolution that we each have to take on in the world. And I so appreciate and I'm grateful for each of you for being a part of this journey. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Turn to someone around you and let them know why they matter, what difference they've made in your life. Have a wonderful, wonderful time. Enjoy.
You've been listening to the podcast Not Quite Strangers. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite video or podcast platform. And for more information and content, go to notquitestrangers.com. See you next time.